our July meeting. First of all, we have apologies for absence from Councillor Warren, Councillor Jeffries and Councillor Hutchinson. Item number 2, declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations of interest this evening? No? Thank you very much. So items 1 and 2 dealt with. Now we come to the minutes of the previous meetings. I trust you all had time to look through those. That's the planning and the regular monthly meeting. Is everybody okay with those? So we can approve the minutes of the meeting last month and the planning meeting as well.
You don't approve the minutes of the planning meeting, you make them.
Okay, we'll do that instead then.
Thank you.
That's right, I was reading a word there and I think I must have changed it slightly. Thank you very much, Town Clerk. So now we come to item number 4, which is the finance report. So over to you, Town Clerk.
Thank you. Nothing dramatic to report. I don't think balances at 30th of June on the two councils, on the two bank accounts the council has at 442,490, and those accounts have both been reconciled to that date. Payments during June totaled 77,819, with 2,780 coming from the Salisbury Gardens accounts. The full list of payments is attached as usual. Receipts during the month total 16,848, with 8,544 coming from Salisbury Gardens rents. The year-to-date variances against preset budget lines for the first quarter of the year is attached, with payments during that period 6,741 over budget and receipts £956 more than budget. And that's the report for this full month of June, Chair.
Thank you very much, Town Clerk. Does anyone have any queries on the very detailed information that we have on the pages? Everyone's studying them. So do we need a proposal on that?
Just acceptance.
Just an acceptance. So is everyone okay with the information that they have received?
You first propose and second.
And can I have a proposer for that, please? Okay, thank you, Councillor Cooper.
I'll just second it.
And Councillor James Toogood. Seconded. Thank you.
Can I raise an item, or just one of those items, quite a minor one? The electricity supply to the Cascade lighting. I keep getting reports that the lighting is not working properly. Doesn't light up at 9 till 11, where a lot of people are still buzzing around and we're losing the advantage of a very attractive cascade that's not lit. It's a question of the timings on the electric, and also one of the lights is not working. So we've asked for this to be sorted before, and I think it is a bit of a priority since we attach a lot of importance to the cascade and its appearance.
Thank you very much. I must admit, as someone who drives down there, and sometimes when it is dark, it seems to be spasmodic.
Yeah.
And I really don't know why. I think Councillor James Toogood, you did talk to the electricians about it at some stage.
Yeah, sorry, we did have discussions with electricians and the type of meter and the type of tariff is on. Did we follow a right through to the bitter end, Alison? So can you tell me the results, or do we need to bring Bury Electricals back in?
Okay, yeah.
Do you want me to speak to Bury Electricals tomorrow morning?
Okay.
And to move it forward?
Yeah,
okay, fine, I will do.
Oh, so thank you, Councillor,
Yeah,
for bringing that up.
Well, we'll raise it in the Assets and Services meeting, but I would like to see it progress
Right, so
Thank you.
we will do that because we are on evenings that are getting longer, aren't we? So we do need to worry about the lighting there. Right, thank you very much. So now on to item number 5, which I think is very interesting. It's the Ventnor Park signage, which you have got.
Not actually, got one more item.
Where am I? Finance Ventnor Park
Oh,
signage.
sorry,
Yeah.
I put the other way around originally.
Oh, did you? Can you go with the highway? Are you okay with this?
No,
That's
the
all right.
that's fine.
Okay, well, on my list, I've got Ventnor Park signage, which is something that I'm sure some people would like to have some input with. We've all got a copy of the proposed signage. Does anyone want to start us off by making some positive comments, I think, because it's very comprehensive.
The only comment I got, please don't get onto me here, is that it shows dogs on leads on the top part. I can't find dogs on leads on the bottom part. Or have I got it wrong? Or am I missing something?
Is there some restriction then, Councillor James? To
I understood that we were trying to get dogs on lead on the bottom part as well.
There is one down by number 7.
There's a baby dog.
That's not a little dog, but it is a dog.
It's actually-
It's a white cat. Hold on, Ian, you don't get it right.
I think
It's just a picture, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not, and it's, I mean, it's jolly, but I'm not sure how informative it is, and that was my concern. I mean, it's if you wanted to know where somewhere is, rather than just wanting to look at a nice picture, it's quite hard to work out from this. It's not really a map, is it? It's more of a drawing. You can't tell, for example, where the path up through the woods goes. So it doesn't tell you where the weather station is, and the fact that you can't get out at the end of the park. Number 9 is the exit to the cliff part, but it doesn't tell you where it goes. So if you wanted to know how to get to Steeple Cove, which is the most common question I'm asked every day when I'm in the park, this bit will be of no help at all. And it doesn't show you where, if you go through the path at number 9, it doesn't give you a clue as to where it goes. It doesn't show you where Flowers Brook is, for example. So it's a sort of jolly drawing, but I'm not sure how much information it's conveying. And there's an awful lot of text on it as well. I mean, the text down the side, what we really want is a map and the guidelines. I'm not sure why we want all this stuff down the right-hand side, which is quite waffly and in places not very well written.
Does anyone want to respond to that? Thank you, Councillor Lucas.
Well, the writing down the side, I find it's okay, but the font that they've used for the instructions down below the map is so small, unnecessarily small. You could easily increase the font and make it much bolder and easier to read. Where the key is. Yeah.
Do we believe that once it's full size, that would write itself, or
no.
not? What does everyone
I think not. If that's the full,
Well, that's not full size, no.
Is it?
It's not full, nothing like
So
that.
we haven't got a life size one then.
We can't have a life size one. The dimensions, we couldn't put dimensions.
I can't imagine dimensions.
I suppose we're twice the size, twice the width of that, I think.
I think going back to Councillor Bond's asking about it not being a map, I understand that, and I did work in a drawing office, so you know this is something that it is a pictogram, not because of the shape of the park, it would be difficult to actually do a to-scale actual drawing of the park. So I think it's been done in this manner to give as much information. That was just my take on it. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts.
If I may add, the minute that led to this does specify a pictogram, not a map.
Yes. So that's the answer.
But it's not an answer, really, though, is it? I mean, I use the park every day for a couple of hours, probably most days, and the 3 questions I'm asked all the time in the park. One is, how do I get to Steeple Cove? One is where's Flowers Brook, and the third one is can you get out of the park at the top by the weather station. And this map, this doesn't matter, it's a map or a pictogram, it doesn't answer any of those. It also doesn't show you, for example, that there's an entrance by the War Memorial, because you can actually get out onto the road. There, it's not marked as an entrance. I'm not sure what it looks nice. I mean, the artwork is very appealing, I grant you that, but it's not very clear. I mean, it's not even very clear how you get up to the upper park. I mean, if you know there are two sets of steps from the lower part to the upper part, you can see them. But if you didn't know that there were two sets of steps, you were just looking at this, it doesn't leap out at you that you can get up to the upper part in the middle. It doesn't, basically, it looks nice, but it's not actually doing the job.
Do you feel that with a few minor adjustments, it could be doing the job, shall we say, for want of better words? Or are you saying that you don't like the design at all?
The design is appealing, but as something to help people find their way around the park, to be honest, it's next to useless. I think if you're looking for anything, you really struggle with this. You've got some, as you say, you've got some fairly small text, which will still be quite small even when it's enlarged. It's not to scale. Yeah, if you're looking for the outdoor gym, for example, yes, if you know where the outdoor gym is, you can see right at the top right-hand corner there's a couple of people doing their exercises. But if you're actually looking for the outdoor gym and you were presented with this, I'm not sure it would help you at all.
Does someone want to respond to that?
I possibly disagree with you, really, because number 8 clearly states the outdoor gym, and there is this path going up to it. Number 8 is in the correct position. I think you could add to number 9. You could add to it and say yes, that goes on to other places. You know, you could change the script a bit and add to that, put more information on there, rather than clutter all this up. Because it does show that pathway, doesn't it?
It's there. I'd be interested to know if you handed it to 10 people around him and said, where's the outdoor gym? I'd be interested to know how quickly they got it.
Well, then you've got to read this.
If I may?
Oh, of course, thank you, Councillor Cocker.
Okay, so without question, Brian, you picked up about the fonts. Without question, the fonts need to be adjusted here. So this isn't the finished article, I'm sure. You also made a mention in the text. Yes, some of it is quite badly written, in fact. For example, under a place for trees, flora and wildlife, you look in the second paragraph, it says badgets, rabbits, a myriad of other small mammals, which doesn't really make sense. And there's a few things like that, you know, within the text on the side. I do agree with Ian about the point that we can clearly, it's not an enormous task to put 2 steep hill cove up in the corner here, and we have to take Ian's word for it that, you know, people are asking how to get to Steep Hill. We know how popular Steep Hill Cove is. It gets in the Sunday Times every other year, doesn't it? You know, and gets bombarded. We know that. I'd also find it very frustrating if you don't know the park and you go all the way up into the top left-hand corner and you find that you can't get out. It's actually
that happens all the time.
Yeah, it's a bit of a long walk to come
get
back
back
to
and
the way back now.
The weather station not being there is a definite omission.
Yeah, I'd say cracking job. Whoever did the pictogram, it's really nice, isn't it? And you know, hats off to them. I don't know who did that. Was
Lauren.
Okay.
The
Oh yeah. Okay. Now I recognise the artwork now because from the Ventnor Day posters. Yeah, no, it's really lovely. It's really nice. It's very Ventnor.
It's done by the Historic Society.
Yep. Okay.
So to study it properly, I think for some of these publishers,
Well,
there's grants progress there.
And it mentions that 7 acres twice, which you don't need to do, and there are some corrections that need to be made to it.
Yeah, it's just that kind of thing. Coming back to other details in the paper, it's still a fantastic price that Signpost Express are offering us. So, I mean, that's a definite thumbs up on that. It's really superb. Is it £1,200 and something pounds? I mean, that really is superb. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I do concur with the comments that have been made.
And that's to 2 signs as well.
Yeah.
So the site where it says you are here, that will be different on the different sides.
Yeah. I mean, if we can put a "you are here" there, we can also put a 2 Steep Hill Cove there. It's not it's not asking the world.
I mean, I think maybe we need to sort of think about it as a park, not as a map of the UK trying to get up to Scotland from Portsmouth. It's not like critical, and the size of it is you can see some of these things from the other parks, can't you? So I think that, you know, although some of you are saying it's not accurate as a map, I still think you could find where you want in the park with a little bit of modification of the information that we have here, personally.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I agree. I think I'm quite familiar with the park, so it kind of makes sense when I look at it. I think what we need to do is run it past somebody who didn't know the park. Yeah, I mean, I can see what it means, but then again, I use the park, and I agree with Ian. Ian, I don't use the park nearly as much as Ian does, but I do actually have had what's the way to Steep Hill Cove questioned several times on my travels around there. So yeah, I mean, I think it's quite nice to look at.
Yeah,
It's very nice.
yeah, it's very attractive, yeah.
The fonts, I agree the font needs to come up into, well, legible size. Although it will be better on the bigger one. It's still going to be quite small and probably look small in comparison to the rest of the font.
It may also be the style of font that's not so easy to read.
I think it's just quite small. It just needs to be brought up a few points.
And make it involved.
Other than that, put the weather station on. I mean, to my mind, it's minor adjustments.
So does everyone agree that with some minor adjustments, this would be an asset to the park?
I mean, yes,
I still think it would be an idea to maybe run it past some people who don't know the park and see what feedback you get.
Yes, I think that's an excellent idea. Yes, please, Councillor Cooper.
Just to echo what Stephen and Ian have actually said, I think they're all very, very valid points, and also what you're saying as well. It's not meant to be a map. It's a depiction of what you're actually looking for. There is the OS map reference on there, and the only thing I wanted to add is that if you look at font size, the recognised protocol is that Arial is the simplest font to actually use, and that definitely needs enlarging.
So in principle, are we happy with what we're seeing with some modifications, so that we can say that we can agree to the production and installation of the signs at the cost of £1,260 for the 2 signs, however, with the modifications that we have recommended?
I think what we're saying is it needs to be run past some people who use the park, who are not familiar with the park. It depends. I mean, if they all say if they all say it's wonderful, that's fine. If they all say it's not helping them, then we need to think again, don't we? So I don't see what the point of agreeing something is until we've got the feedback.
So, Councillor Bond, as you spend so much time at the park, would you be willing to show this to some visitors in the park and see what the feedback is as a survey?
We could do it that way. Yeah, I mean, people I know most are the people who use the park all the time. But yeah, we could try it that way, I guess.
I would ask that it wasn't Thursday morning at 9 o'clock when they're judging the park, though. That would be best to avoid that, if you didn't mind. How does everybody feel about us doing that then?
I personally think 2 of us have a crack at it, really ask people. As with great respect to Councillor Bond. I'm in the park. I can meet 3K next week, and I'm happy to spend a bit of time and ask a few people, visitors. I think 2 of us have a crack at it personally.
Everyone happy with that?
Absolutely.
Yes, yes.
As well as taking on the additional feedback from members of the public, I think we should note everything that's been said at this table as well. So I clearly think that there's a very strong case to put at number 9 at 2 Steep Hill Cove. And also, I would suggest, if you can make a mental note of this step, up in this corner here, where it sort of suggests that it just goes on and on and on, simply by putting the weather station and simply by putting a boundary there. I mean, if this boundary that we see on the horizon there, if that clearly comes down the side, then that's going to show people that there isn't a way out of Ventnor here.
Yes.
So it would make sense to put the boundary around. And if you have the opportunity to thank the artist, please do.
Yes.
Besides the nitpicking stuff, the artist should be thanked.
I don't know whether you mentioned it, but there are established pictograms for toilets and cafes. Cafe shows a cup and saucer with knife and fork crossed over. And I think a lot of people will go and say, where's the toilet? Where can I get a cup of coffee? That's the sort of thing you would often want if you go into a park. Because a lot of this is general information rather specific. And so I would certainly like to see a pictogram against number 4, which shows toilet sign, and against the cafe, because you've got a couple of people sitting under an umbrella, but it doesn't say that they're serving food there.
I understand.
So that would be very useful.
I think we can say then that there are 1 or 2 things that we would like to see changed, and that's probably not going to happen overnight, and that we should consult with some people who are unfamiliar with the park to see how they find the things that they're looking for. So I'm not quite sure, Town Clerk, how do we go with the recommendation? Are we still okay with the cost, but we need the modifications?
I think modifications are not a problem, and the question is whether the town council as a whole wants to see it again before commissioning it, or whether they have enough confidence in our recording of the adjustments that are proposed, and which we welcome to let that go once those are incorporated.
I think it depends on the feedback we get, doesn't it?
So
if we get a few, if people say, I mean, if people say that it looks really good and it's helpful, then there's no problem. If people say if people have some suggestions, then we need to bring them back to somebody. If the general view is it's confusing and not very helpful, then we need to think again, don't we? And we can't prejudge that.
why don't we put a timer on the end by the end of the week?
We can get the feedback by the end of the week, I'm sure. But it's what we do with it, then, isn't it? And it would also be helpful, I think, if members had a work through the text and came up with some suggestions there, because you could probably edit that down a bit. I mean, people of all ages come to this award-winning park for all sorts of different reasons. It doesn't tell you anything, really. You could just cut that. There's quite a bit you could chop out, and it's still.
You're very good at that, aren't you, really?
We can cut it. The smaller, the more we cut it down, the larger the font will be.
Yeah.
So would the council like to see the changes and before we go ahead? Can we have?
Well, certainly, I think we should circulate something to members at the very least, even if it's delegated to the town clerk. But then it's a question of timescale, isn't it? Do we have a feel for how long it's going to take to produce?
We need to perhaps ask Nigel that. Nigel, do you know how long it will take to produce this sign, please?
I don't know offhand, I'm afraid.
Do you know if it's weeks or months?
Weeks.
No, okay.
Signpost situation very good and very quick with signs.
So
A couple of weeks maybe.
So it could well be put up for the peak of the summer if we get our skates out, I guess. Yeah, okay.
Easily, doesn't it?
Speaking personally, I'd be very happy to see it distributed electronically.
You would.
I don't think we need to roll it all the way into an August meeting. But
Yeah, that would be nice.
Unless the feedback's
Yes,
taking it another direction.
so based on that, I guess we should pass the resolution.
yes. Okay, so shall I read that again?
With the caveats.
So the recommendation is that the town council is recommended to agree the production and installation of signs at both the Park Road entrances at a cost of £1,260, with the caveat that we need to generally agree some modifications.
Yeah, I think more subject to consultation with park users and a further opportunity for members to comment on the text and drafting of the notice and something like that.
The town clerk's happy with that?
Happy with that?
Yes, so can we have a proposal for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Logan and Councillor Bond.
And I agree with Stephen, the artwork is actually it's very attractive. It's just it's a question of its utility more than.
I want to show of hands, please. I'm sorry, I forgot to show of hands. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know that's good. Right, well, thank you for your input on that. That was very important because it's been a long time coming, hasn't it? Some signage, so I think that's really good. The next item is quite exciting because it's new. We need to look at the option to join the Chamber of Commerce as a council. So, do you wish to speak on this? Or?
I think it's straightforward in the sense that Nigel has had conversations with Ryde Town Council, as you'll see from the report, who have found the connection with Chamber extremely useful in progressing their business association and business activities generally. It's a very small cost, and we're happy to recommend it to members. Is there anything else you to say?
No, that's fine. I just wonder if any councillors have either any experience or any questions on that. Right, yeah, thank you, Councillor.
Just one question, where it says on point C, it says HR assistance. Obviously, I understand about the downloads of documents, etc., but I just wanted to have clarity on what HR assistance means. Do you know?
Yes, can we ask Nigel if he could tell us about that, please?
Yeah, they have for the smaller businesses which we would fall into, they have a telephone assistance line if you're having issues, HR issues, and it's free of charge. I don't think that it would be used, but they do offer that service to all of their members. They're full-time employees of the wider Chamber of Commerce and across the UK. And so you can dial in at any time and you get free advice or free where to point people in the direction of any help you might find. So it's not actually it's not HR as in an HR department of a bigger company, but it's just where you would find information if you so require, and it's aimed at smaller businesses with few employees who wouldn't have an HR department.
Okay, thank you, Nigel.
So, anyone else have any questions? If you look at D, you can look at the website there, and I think it's very interesting. Point A, that the town's traders are getting much more collective in their thoughts, and Nigel is managing to get them to gel together and to want to go forward and make change and make progress, all for the betterment of the town. So hence this would be possibly beneficial to help them gel like this.
Yeah, no, I think it's really good. I know Nigel's been doing some good work already with the businesses, and I think making them more professional and more organised, if you like, is key for the town, really, both for maximising our visitor appeal and also for getting more things done in the town. And we're actually, if you look around the island, we're actually behind some of the other towns on the island, let alone other places in the country. So it's a real gap. You're getting the businesses organised, professional, promoting the town, playing their part, working with the council is all really important stuff. And I know Nigel's made a great start on taking that forward.
So anyone else that would like to say anything about that, or are we all in general agreement that it's a very positive thing for a low cost? Yes, yes. Yes, so we'll go for the recommendation, and that is the Town Council is recommended to apply for membership of the Isle of Wight Chamber of Commerce at a current cost of £315 for 12 months. Someone like to propose that, please? Councillor Watkins and Councillor Bond, seconded, please. Show of hands, please. Thank you. Item number 7 is instigated by the town clerk as the major project update, and you've been given 2 appendixes to look at. But before we go to that, I really would like to compliment the town clerk on the page that we've given with the overview of the history, the colourful history of Ventnor and how it has risen really almost out of the ashes and come up to a town council that people are looking to as doing the right things. I was very impressed with reading that, and I hope some of you were as well. So I think the town clerk would like to introduce the items that he has on his list, and we can look at them one time.
Thank you. Yes, my apologies, section 1 is so long, but given the number of new members on the current council, I thought it might be helpful to have a summary of the path the councils before you have travelled and the major impact they have had, not only on the performance of the town council itself, which is remarkable, but also on the structures within the town in relation to community development and business and economic development, which are also been remarkable. My background was, I think you know, before I came here, was in regeneration in general, working and living in one of the poorest local authorities in the country. It currently rates the 15th most deprived out of the 360 local authorities in England. So I was deeply involved with regeneration activity, from which I learned the lesson that although funding, and there was lots of funding in those days, I helped Tony Blair spend £2 million of his neighbourhood renewal fund, mainly on the kind of activities which on a smaller scale we're doing here in Ventnor. What I also learned was that in terms of having an impact on the actual position of the town that I was working in, it's all about what makes a difference is changes to structure, not provision for some of the other services which the funding did supply. And in fact, the position of the town that I spent all Tony Blair's money in worsened in the 10 years since I left. And because the structures didn't change, the poor places got poorer, and the impact on that on the town overall became all the greater. So the focus of your predecessor councils on major projects has been really important to me and to the councillors that I've had the privilege of working with in achieving those very significant gains. And I hoped and still do that tradition of working away at structural changes within the town to improve the quality of life of those who live in it can continue, and if anything, with even more impact than before. There is one underlying issue which I haven't referred to in the report. As you know from previous discussions, there are 13 areas on the island which are in the most deprived 20% on the government's index for multiple deprivation, and 2 of them are in Ventnor. What has worried me is that the other areas of the island which fall in the same category have had and are having major investment from the Isle of Wight Council's funding with its aim to access from the government. There are, as you will know, millions of pounds being spent in East Cowes, there are millions of pounds being spent in Newport, and there are millions of pounds being spent in Ryde. this is a reflection of the change of direction of the Isle of Wight Council in serious regeneration activity, and it is of course to be welcomed, as are all those developments. The issue for you and for me and my colleagues is that to date, Ventnor has had absolutely none of that funding, and it's time it got its share. And one way of making that more likely to happen is if we, the town council, are able to propose projects which don't actually take any funding from them on a large scale as being necessary. And part of the strength of the major projects that we've been looking at are that they fall into that category. They just require collaboration and cooperation of the council in facilitating their development if you as the town council are equally serious about looking for them. I didn't want to give the impression that the structural changes that have been achieved in the past were straightforward. Most of them have involved battles of one sort or another, and certainly close engagement with the Isle of Wight Council at political as well as officer level. And it's the latter which, in my hopes, will strengthen as you move forward over the next 3 years of your terms of office. And as some sort of starter for 10, there is an Appendix B, a list of what the major projects can be, and that Appendix B, as I've indicated in the report, has come out of a senior staff team meeting when we looked back at the projects in Appendix A, which are still to be completed, and talked about others which have become more of a focus. So if you look with me briefly by way of background before to help with your discussion, obviously Boniface Fields is one that still needs completion, although it's made remarkable progress. It costs the Isle of Wight Council nothing except a willingness to say, or to give us permission after we've taken up occupancy, letting us stay there. Car park management equally wouldn't cost them any money, but will give the town council a significant weapon in making the place more attractive to visitors as well as to residents by the ability to do all kinds of things with car parking spaces and the revenue that arises from them and the costs that they present to residents and visitors. We presented a business case 4 years, nearly, well, 3.5 years ago, and they still haven't actually said no. They just haven't said yes. So that remains to be completed if you're up for it. Ventnor Central, we had a brief hope last month that the new government's community ownership fund might provide us with another way of funding the rescue of Ventnor Central. In the event, it turns out it doesn't and couldn't provide sufficient funding to deal with the size of the issue, which is somewhere around £1 million or up to that level. But we, certainly as a staff team, haven't given up hope, and hope you won't either, of actually rescuing it rather than let it rot, which is what the Isle of Wight Council would do if we gave it back, and you wouldn't want to give it back anyway in view of the importance in the providing a home for baby box and the community pantry. The Upper Ventnor land has been on the Town Council's agenda for a long time, and we need to make more progress with that. We've had recent contact with Chris Ashman, the Director of Regeneration, and he is still willing to provide support, not money, I hasten to add, or at least not yet, but certainly to work with us and with you in seeing if that site can be developed as we all agreed, you all agreed, would make a major difference to the life of people in Aberdeen in providing economic opportunities on a big scale. The poverty issue, clearly you're well aware of, and you also know it's not going to go away, and it's actually going to get more serious for those who are at the sharp end of it. And as you know, we have been supplying food vouchers, the only town council on the island to do that on a significant scale to a significant number of households. Alison still gets phone calls from some of those who receive them, and not exactly begging, but indicating their desperation that now the vouchers are no longer available, and that will increase. The family centre, as people often say to us, and I'm sure to you, it's a disgrace that such a valuable building is used one day a week, as is the case now. It didn't used to be like that. When the health visitors were based here, it was a lively, full-time centre of support for parents and their children. Something needs to be done about that. They can't get away, they shouldn't be allowed to get away with continuing with that arrangement. Apart from anything else, it would be an ideal, much more effective place for baby blocks and the community pantry. Housing, well, Stephen Cocky has been reminding you and us for some time about the threat that represents to the town in terms of not having spaces in which to accommodate those who want to be here, and will continue to be part of the hollowing out of the town, which is my overriding fear for it, not just because of housing, but taking them all together. The bandstand needs some weight from you to shift what's a very silly, in my view, blockage at present. We know that Southern Water are prepared to hand it over, and we also know that there are, I believe, my information is at the last count, 8 people who have expressed an interest in taking it over, and with sufficient funds. But Southern Water's current stance, and I've seen this in writing from them, though not to me, is that they will not take part in negotiations with anyone until they have secured a planning application for it. So that's where that's stuck. And that ought to be possible to shift that with a bit of weight from here. The Haven continues to worry me, as those of you who've been around a long time know. I still see it as arguably the biggest threat to Ventnor's brand as a visitor centre and tourist attraction. Once the seaweed gets underway in generating its volumes of hydrogen sulfide, this is not a place anybody wants to be. I now know that finally a new contract has been agreed between the Isle of Wight Council and Sean Strevens. It's taken longer than it should have done, but it was there completed in time. It's an increased cost to the Isle of Wight Council, which they certainly won't be comfortable with, but Sean Strevens needed because of the cost to him of necessary repairs to the boat that deals with the seaweed. So instead of 80,000 a year, he now has a 2-year contract at 103,000 a year. But it's only 2 years, and we're already obviously a quarter of the way through the first of those. The Mayor and I were also told in a recent meeting with County Councillor Gary Peace that they are considering trying to sell it again. So it's hard to imagine who in their right mind would want to buy it, but that's by the by. So that's the list from us to you, and hopefully we can get on with it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Town Clerk. It's quite an extensive list and it's quite eclectic too. I don't know whether or not it would be better if we just had a short discussion about each one going down the list, or whether or not we pick out the most likely to succeed. Quite happy to go with the majority. Would it be easier if we just worked down the list and just have a little discussion and update about, yes, everybody seems to be going yes on that. So if we look at Boniface Fields, ongoing, yes, so that's the thing there. And the only thing that is important is the fact that the planning commission will run out, and that will come upon us probably quicker than we actually realise. So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that.
I remember that, sorry, Councillor Lucas suggested, a good suggestion, when we met about 2 or 3 weeks ago, that we invite the planning officer to come along and see basically what they allow us to do with it. Do they want it modified, or let's just keep it as it is? Because we could bring it up to standard, but of course you're talking a lot of money to do that. But for what it would cost us to have a meeting with the planning officer, would it cost nothing? That's interesting. Okay, I think we should do that actually. And I'm going to be careful what I say here because I don't want to push any particular one. But I think as Councillor Luke and myself, and I would invite Andrew Hitt along. He's been involved in all the way along, and he'd do it at no cost to us. That's just my suggestion. Because I think we need to find out what they let us do before we start looking at something more modern.
Councillor Lucas, would you like to
That's a
comment
great
on that?
idea. I mean, we have grand plans, but there's no point in us doing a golden job when he's happy with the silver one, is there? So.
No, Nigel is already planning to be in touch with the planning department and to suggest precisely that, Councillor. So that would be a very welcome development if you're willing, and Andrew Hitt is willing to join those discussions.
Yes, okay, I'll get on to Andrew tomorrow and I'll try to target that as well.
The important thing is that we've proven that it's a really solid community benefit. And it's not something not wishes and promises. We've actually proved it, and the planners will have to see its solid requirement in it.
Well, that's an excellent conversation about item number 1. Does anybody else want to add anything to that, or do we think that that's a good way to go?
I'll just endorse that completely.
You will. Thank you
Based
very
on
much.
common sense.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Now, the next one is probably more difficult. Car park management, the pot of gold that the Isle of Wight Council has, especially in the central car park, that they're not very willing to negotiate on. Does anyone have any innovative ideas to?
Well, I can speak to that to let you know a bit more about where we got to. Two meetings were had. The first was with Phil Jordan and some of the other council officers, where the proposals were kicked around, and of course it was mentioned again. The business case had been presented, and still no reply had been gotten. And then Phil Jordan, if I'm not mistaken, perhaps you can correct me there, David, also organised a separate meeting for the Isle of Wight Council officers who are particularly concerned with this realm to meet with the clerk and myself. The feeling from the Isle of Wight Council is, whilst Phil Jordan, who is ultimately the decision maker here, whilst he has some interest in this project, because he believes to some degree in localism, and the town parish councils having some responsibility for car parks within their areas, he does have the officers in his other ears telling him, no, 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 please don't. As the clerk mentioned, theoretically, this is a neutral cost to the Isle of Wight Council, but there is an administrative burden, and there is quite a few hurdles that they would need to jump to go from the situation they're in now into a situation where Ryde, Cowes, Ventnor, Sandown, were in control of their car parks. It is quite a big jump. So, let me express a certain amount of cynicism about this ever coming to fruition. But the last meeting that I had on this topic was with the chair of Ryde, Freshwater, Newport town parish councils, and there was an action point to go away from that, and that was for Councillor Michael Lilly to go back, who is the county councillor, to go back and bend the ear of Phil Jordan and try and get some of the action points pushed along. I tried to get in contact with Michael a couple of times this week. I haven't done so, but I will do. And I will copy you in as soon as I've spoken to Michael and I know what direction he thinks it can go in, then I will update you accordingly.
So can I ask you, Councillor Pocket, is it an all or nothing? If all the other towns want to do it, can Ventnor do it on its own, or does it have to be all the other towns as well?
There is a very strong reluctance within the Isle of Wight Council on the officer side for their own reasons. But, you know, quite valid reasons, you know, we have to say they're not just digging their heels in for the sake. We know they have, you know, resource issues, we know they have financial issues, so it's not a us versus them situation, you know. I would say yes, it is a bit all or nothing, because they won't give anything extra to Ventnor. However, if there was a big battle and there was Ventnor and Ryde and Freshwater and Newport, and if the county councillors were involved in those discussions, then there's a greater likelihood of that officer time being dedicated to solve the hurdles. The officer time isn't going to be dedicated to it for Ventnor.
So would you be happy, Councillor Pocket, to
Yeah,
try and move this forward?
I dropped the ball there and I'll pick it up again.
Thank you.
But yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Does everyone think that's a good idea?
I do. The only point I'd add on this one is I do think our position will be stronger if we had a clear plan for what we would do with the car parks if we took them over. We've discussed it a number of times, and there've been some good ideas floating around about doing the permits differently and having different, you know, charging for long and short stay at different car parks and badging them differently and so on. But we've never sat down and said, if they actually, by some miracle, came to say yes, well, we'll give you the car parks from next year, we haven't got a plan that we've discussed and agreed as to what would change, how we deal with the charging and the signage and so on. And I think our position would be stronger if we had that in advance rather than later.
I think that's an excellent idea, Councillor Pond, because one of the things that the local shopkeepers want to be involved in is the cost of car parking and whether or not we could do a particular day where people get it, you know, at a preferential rate. So I think there are some good ideas out there, and perhaps that would be good to have a little working party to come up with that before we do that.
And it would concentrate our minds as well, wouldn't it? Because, you know, it would actually make us demonstrate that we're capable of coming up with it.
Yes, and I think also it would be very good from our relationship with the local shopkeepers, because they really do want to see some action on this. Even if we failed, I think they'd be happy that we tried, whereas at the moment they do feel we're sitting on the fence at the moment.
Just a couple of comments.
Yes, thank you, Town Clerk.
The town council in 2015 employed a consultant to produce a report on the feasibility of the town council managing all 8 of the car parks, and there are a lot of very practical and very interesting proposals in that report. It's very detailed, very thorough, and it's been presented to the Isle of Wight Council as part of our business plan. It could certainly be updating, and Councillor Bond's suggestion of consulting more widely on it would be very, very welcome. I'm not sure about the reliance on other councils. The Newport chair, for example, because I was at the meeting that Councillor Pocket referred to, I don't believe is enthusiastic about taking on management. In fact, they've settled for something rather less at present, haven't they? Freshwater, well, Ryde certainly were interested, so if you're able to contact Mike again, that will be really, really very positive. But I go back to the point I made earlier, which is that the Isle of Wight Council have given nothing by way of resources to Ventnor in the last, well, 7 years to my knowledge. And it's time they did. And this is a simple transaction, it's not onerous. And I don't happen to believe that the officers are opposed to it. Their problem is only, well, it's a big one, but it's only that they have been set a budget by the politicians, which they are now required as part of their work to comply with. And my conversations with Alex Mills, who's heads up that department, over the years have always been that he's very wide open to proposals and suggestions. And when we emerged from discussions with the then chief executive about the car park proposal from the consultant and the town council's strong commitment, as it was at that time, to localism, local management of all the town services, with the 4 car parks, and the officers were very cooperative, and they have remained so that the contact that we have with them, Alison in particular, it's very positive. The problem is a political one. So it's your problem.
Yes. Does anyone want to add anything to that? So we have to be optimistic about that. So if Councillor Cockett can move things slightly forward, then we can see where we are next time we meet. So now I'm mentioning the words Ventnor Central and what hasn't been tried. Town clerk has explained that there was a plan where there appeared to be some funding that would come out the right way, but it didn't work out. So I don't know if anyone has any ideas, because we know we need baby box. The pantry now is their latest idea, which has made it even more important to keep things going. But we're not moving forward. And according to Councillor James Toogood, who I will ask to just explain this to you, he says the building will have to have some money spent on it very shortly. So, Councillor Toogood, do you want to?
Yes, I mean, 2 ways of looking at it. Now Baby Box is a charity. Could not they take it over the building completely and then apply for charitable money to do repairs to it? Because if we keep it, we've got a lot of work to do on it. The windows are in a very bad state of repair. We have a fire door downstairs which is rotten. We've got gutters to repair and the roof's in a very poor state. And a lot of things we can't turn a blind eye to because it's not going to get better. So is there a chance of Baby Box taking the whole building on and getting grants for it through the lottery or other sources as they're a charity? And we hold on to it whilst they're doing this exercise. Whilst they're doing this exercise, we could carry on as we are.
Be worried about the capability side, Jim. I mean, they're a charity that's providing free baby equipment to young mothers. They never imagine they'd end up managing a property with responsibility for big budgets and I mean, I don't know how on earth.
They could employ someone to manage it, and it can be done.
I want to say that I agree with Councillor Bob for the record.
I do really well pack that down.
And he's absolutely right. I mean, that cropped up in looking at the common ownership fund.
Yeah.
That was an issue. It wasn't what stopped it, but it is an issue. They're very badly funded. They're only funded for 6 months. That's fully committed already. And struggling. I mean, Tony McCarthy has been buying food for them from local shops because they're not getting enough food delivered to fill their shelves. And so not spending ratepayer money, I hasten to add. There is an issue, that's an issue, and the prospect of getting, I don't think the money's available out there anyway.
So with that, really, we've got no option but to hang on to it. We've got to keep it. It's such an important part of the town. But I mean, wouldn't it be a good idea to try and find out are we supplying different parts of the island? I understand people come from Rye, Braden come to it. So if we're supplying different parts of the island, could we not then ask different councils to put something towards it? Because if we hold on to it much longer, we do need to spend possibly in a very short time a couple £1,000 there doing some emergency repairs. It's not just
Councillor Lucas, do you want to respond to that?
Well, jumping ahead, I think we ought to put all our effort into trying to get the baby box into the family centre, because I've known the Ventnor Central for quite a few years, and I see it as an expensive millstone, that building, and I can't ever really see that we would be able to afford to use it in an economic way or get funding for it. And so I agree with Jim that we would just hold on to it temporarily until we find somewhere better for the baby box that is more sustainable for their type of operation. It horrifies me when I go into that building, and just every time you look at it you see pound notes, and it's I don't think it's for us really, unless we had a really major need for it. So
Yeah, I can understand that. So could we jump to the, oh sorry,
No, sorry,
That's all right.
we can do both. I mean,
Yes, we could jump, I was going to say, could we jump to the family centre, yes.
I personally don't see how you could, this baby box and the pantry could use the family centre. There's a vast amount of stock that they have to carry all the time. So where is it going to go?
Has someone ever worked out the square meterage that they do require? I mean, that obviously would be the best thing to do, just because there would be no point in us putting energy into the family centre for that purpose if the size is not adequate.
Well, it isn't. I mean, you only have to go in there. I mean, who's been in the baby box? It's packed. I mean, it's packed with stuff that they need. It's needed. It's not just randomly collected.
Not just temporarily overstocked or anything.
No. This is vast need, and now you've got the community pantry, which is taking up another chunk of central. These are fixtures. If you're going to move something into the family centre, then that too will become a fixture, and then what's going to happen at the family centre?
Can I just, before we go too deep into the family centre, I think I'm right in saying we've had no report on that to this council, and it seems to me quite a big new project. And there does seem to be, to me, to be an opportunity there, but I would have thought we'd want to report on that with all the issues for us to debate properly, right, rather than just a few lines on this document. I mean, yeah, I mean, in support that it seems like there may be some potential, but we need to know all the ins and outs, don't we, before we agree to put it on a list of projects.
Sorry, Councillor Gallagher, can I just...
Just going to comment. I think it's incredibly important as a town council that anyone watching this meeting now, that there's no ambiguity at all that this council does absolutely support the fantastic work of Baby Box and the pantry. And I recognise all of the difficulties of this asset, and I just wondered if it might not be a good idea to actually set up a working party with the members of the staff that are actually running that, to see if we can actually collectively come up with ideas, because it is a problem, isn't it? We do need the room. I take on board what John's actually saying. I don't know if that would actually fit into the family centre, having been round there often. I just don't know where the stock would actually go. But I do recognise that, fiscally we have to be, prudent and with our monies. And yeah, when I go around there, I do see pound signs everywhere. So I think it is a massive problem of concern. And I think that, perhaps collectively having those people on board, not to frighten them, because I've certainly had inquiries that I've absolutely quashed and says, that as far as I'm aware, this town council is absolutely in total support of the fantastic work that you actually do. So I think it's important to put that on record.
Thank you,
I've
Councillor
had conversations as well, and there is a great deal of concern of the people who are actually working there and the people that use it, that they could lose it.
I think, Councillor Watkins, is sort of perfectly obvious that the state of that building is known throughout the town, you know, not just by builders and councillors and things. Everyone knows that it's, you know, it is by hanging on by a thread. But the thing is, we have to do something before it explodes or implodes on us. And that's what's going to happen if we don't do something positive to move it forward in some way or another.
Right, but we shouldn't be having this conversation in isolation. We should be having it with the people who actually work there and the people that use it.
Yeah, that was the point I was going to make. I mean, they're saying it's used 1 day a week, so I take it that's still by the family centres, as you know, that's actually the children's centres are still using it 1 week. And that does kind of preclude us being able to just use it for storage. But somebody else is actually doing it. And I've been in the building, and it's a useful building, but it's a collection of very small rooms, where it's not really one big area. And it's, so, I mean, it's so, for that kind of thing, it would have its uses. I mean, it's very good because you can do a lot of things and deal more privacy than you would normally. However, in terms of an area for storage, I just don't see. Well, I'm not saying it doesn't exist, I just haven't spotted where that could be in that centre. Yeah, that doesn't. The other one that was in my mind and came up to a little bit that seems to be not on this was the potential what was happening with the bus station, because that was mooted as well. But somebody bought that, haven't they?
That's due for private development.
That's
I
one for
don't
private
think
development,
I don't think we've seen a planning application yet. There are rumours circulating, but that's not really for us to discuss now.
No, I just wondered if that actually.
No, it's not.
It's not progressing.
Table. But now, certainly.
I think the town clerk wanted to give some information.
I share the concerns about the size of the family centre, and I wouldn't think, certainly we weren't thinking of it, when I say we, I mean the staff team, weren't thinking of it only as a possible source for baby pox. It's just a building which is central and which has capacity for community development in all sorts of ways. As you will know. I agree about the space. It's not one big space, it's lots of small ones, as you say. And just one general comment, Chair, if I may save members' time. I genuinely wasn't looking for decisions on these projects tonight because they all need a lot of work and plans and that kind of stuff, which the staff will be very more than happy to carry on with. What I was looking for was a reassurance, really, that the council was up for these and supportive of them. And if not, you would tell us, and then we could stop worrying about it. But if the feeling so far is very positive and it's very welcome, but this will take most of your remaining 3 years to sort that out.
But coming back to my point on the family centre, we haven't had a discussion on it, have we at all? We've had no information or report on the family centre.
No, because we haven't started.
No, but I mean, the next steps can't be negotiations with Isle of Wight Council and Ardos. The next step, surely, is a report to the council setting out the issues and opportunities.
Well, it may be that they are not going to part with it, because that's the signals we've had from officers so far. We have talked to them, as you do, and if they're not going to part with it, then there's perhaps not much point in putting a lot of staff time into it. But I take your point, it needs planning before we go anywhere significant with it.
Okay, so on that, I do think that we should just have a little bit of a discussion on Upper Ventnor land, because I think that's pretty key, because we jumped over that one. So you have the notes here as to where we were at, and it seems to be a bit of a hiatus at the moment. So
I can come in here again quite easily. As you all know, we've had drawing done for 25 units. Some of them joined together, most of them 750 square feet, sorry. But to make sure it's going to work, we need to determine the correct size of land we've got to work with. And go back a little, over a year ago, I got a price for that, to have it surveyed, and that was £750. That up to 1,000. But now things have overgrown so much, we've got to find the perimeters of the site. So to have that now surveyed properly you'd have to have a digger put up there and someone watching the digger, and you could be looking at, we could be looking at spending anything up to £2,000 just to make sure we got the site we're talking about to get the industrial units on there. The industrial units which was designed would fit Ventnor very nicely because they're small units joined together, so if you want to increase you can have next door neighbour and so on really. But for anyone to get moving in any direction, someone's got to spend around about up to £2,000, get it surveyed properly to make sure what we got drawn will fit on there. And otherwise, until that's done, you can't move anywhere at all.
My gut feeling is that the business case should precede that in actual fact. Because I understand what you're saying, that obviously you need surveying done before the architect can do his work properly and so on and so forth. But I'd be very sort of hesitant about seeing the architect get paid, the surveyor gets paid, everybody gets paid, and then the project comes to nothing for political reasons, for financial reasons. Excuse me. I mean, really, what will decide whether or not it goes ahead isn't whether you can put 20, not total respect for your opinion, Jim, of course, isn't whether or not you can fit 24 or 25 units, it's whether or not 24 or 25 units can pay for themselves in a sustainable manner with the correct return on investment and so on. So I would put the brakes a little bit on spending more money on surveying. What I've learned in doing renovations of my house is that the architect always gets his money. Whether or not the extension gets built, whether or not anything happens, the architect, because he always goes first.
I've got to come in a bit there, really. It's a little bit unfair because the architect's actually been paid to come 5 units, and it's only £500. But until
I know you have an excellent working relationship, but you know what I'm saying.
Basically, being the industry and to deal with industrials as we do, it's common sense to build them. The longer we leave it, the dearer we're going to get because steel is going to pull the time. But I've spoken to 2 estate agents who deal with commercial buildings, who I deal with all the time. It's very vulnerable to put them up there. There's a massive shortage of small industrials in the Isle of Wight. There really is. So I mean, a business study, how much can you pay for a business study? Which is, quite frankly, common sense. You only got to speak to an estate agent and speak to a developer. He gives you a cost per unit.
Well, it was common sense to build the 12 apartments, wasn't it, at Ventnor Central, and then finally we got so far through it, and then finally it fell down on pounds and pence, didn't it? Yeah. So yes, I mean, on the face of it, it was absolutely obvious. Yes, we should build those apartments. You know, they will be let out 100% of the time in an instant, which they would have done, but ultimately the pounds and pence didn't work out.
It's probably a bit unfair, actually, Councillor, because that was due to we were a bit confused for someone wanting the amount of rent we were going to get per unit.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. So we need that presented before.
Yeah, I'm going to fight my corner pretty hard on this one. I'm happy to speak to 2 main stations on the Isle of Wight to find out how much we get per square unit, what's the likelihood of renting them out, and I'm quite happy to speak to a steel developer to find out how much it would cost me to put a unit up there. I know we've got the concrete base, we've got the drainage is in quite a long way up there. I'm going to have to do a bit of work on it and come back with some rough ideas before we start spending any money at all.
As you know, from over because we discussed it a few years, I would love to see all of that, and I'm sure we're unanimous.
That will be a good starting point with it, before we spend any, make any investment to go further.
And that would be we're not spending a penny. It's all under the old Powers Act.
Okay,
for nothing.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Cooper.
I mean, obviously, I represent Upper Ventnor, so I'm very, very interested in what Councillor Cooper is actually saying. What I would like clarity on here is what he was actually saying. How do you actually ascertain that those units will be used and not a white elephant as you're suggesting, Councillor Cockett? That's what I was a bit concerned about when you actually said that. Because if we're actually saying we're going to halt it because we're not quite sure if we're going to get the rents in and it's going to be commercially viable, where would we actually go if we if we don't do that, if we don't go further,
When-
pressing ahead.
I could probably answer that as well, if you don't mind me.
Yeah.
When we had a meeting with Claire Alderfield, she had mentioned to us that she has a list of companies and people who want small industrial units. They are a rarity, the small ones. The trouble is you go from 500, 750, and then you go up to 1,000, 2,000, and it becomes unaffordable for companies who basically almost work out of a shed. They don't want big overheads, etc., etc. So, from my experience in the industry, they are rare, small units. There's nothing hardly around. You'll get the occasional one come up in Sandown, the lower end of Sandown, but there's very little about, honestly. And all we can do in this case is do an exercise, can't we? I listen to what you say. I mean, the whole world's in a bad place at the moment, so we never expected what's happening at the moment. You can't allow for that, can you? But it's worth having an exercise in front of you from professional people. That's my view. That's how I'd like to.
I agree.
You know, if it's okay with councillors and everyone else. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Councillor
Well,
Watson,
okay.
sorry.
Just off the top of my head, I don't know whether this is doable or not, but wouldn't it make it more financially viable, if allowed, to put little one-bedroom units above the commercial units?
We've already tried a feasibility study for that. We paid £10,000 for it, and the answer was no.
Because,
I can send you a copy.
okay. Because, I mean, I'm just thinking about the house, the massive housing
We
shortage.
did that, and we did that for both there and the central, because there was then a fund called community-led funding,
Right,
and we were given to understand that we could get 600,000
right.
from that. But as Councillor Tingle was saying earlier, the sums don't add up.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you for that discussion. So probably the best one to go on to now would be housing, since we have mentioned it. We have got a little here. I don't know if the town clerk has got anything that he wants to add to that.
We
No.
just need to do some research here, that's all.
Okay, so if we agree that we are doing research on housing, because as you know,
I would just like to mention that I wrote, following a motion that we passed at this council, I did write to the portfolio holder at the time, Paul Fuller. I sent him a copy of the minutes from our meeting. I, obviously as politely as possible, asked for a comment. I didn't receive anything from him at the time. I have since then forwarded that same email on to Ian Stevens, who took over that portfolio, because originally Paul Fuller held housing and planning, and then it got split, and Ian Stevens took over the portfolio. And unfortunately, I didn't hear anything back from him either. All in all, so, I mean, I follow this quite closely. I'm very disappointed with the performance of the Isle of Wight. Looking around at other local authorities who've really been kicking up a big fuss on this topic, and they're pushing forward as hard as they can. And if you recall from the motion that we passed here, one of the specific bullet points was basically please engage with other similar local authorities, coastal communities who are facing these issues, and try and work as a pact. And it wouldn't have been too hard to have sent an email back saying, thank you, Stephen, Mayor of Ventnor at the time, thanks, Stephen, you know, this is noted and we are doing X, Y, and Z. There, just want to put it on the record.
okay, thank you. Councillor Bond, you wanted to?
Yeah, I mean, it's an important issue, and obviously our role is limited to lobbying, really, because we're not the lead partner on this. But I just wanted to mention that Politics South on Sunday, I think not yesterday, but last week, week before the Sunday, Ian Stevens was on Politics South, and they did a feature on the Isle of Wight and this very issue, and about the problems of second homes and all the debts are causing local residents. And there was a couple of interviews with islanders who can't get housing. And there was a discussion and you know, with the guy who chairs the programme. So, I mean, Ian Stevens is clearly working on it, and it is rising up the political agenda. I think people looking at what's happening in Wales. Wales are talking about quadruple council tax for second home owners and ideas like that, which Ian Stevens was quite supportive of in principle. So if he hasn't, even though he hasn't replied to you, he's clearly he's plugging away at it, and
Yes.
we need to give the Isle of Wight Council our backing really and make sure it stays on the agenda.
I'm sure he is very, very busy, but I have a feeling that when we passed the motion here, we were quite forward, progressive council, and I was hoping to get something back. But yes, things are coming on, albeit slowly.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. And then at the bottom we have Ventnor Haven, and I haven't forgotten property. I will go back to that one in a moment. Ventnor Haven, we all know that there's a problem with Ventnor Haven, and I don't know whether or not there's anything we can do to make things any different. If anyone's got any wonderful ideas to assist with this. The seaweed is, you know, with the temperature, the seaweed is definitely coming. We've had a couple of days where it's starting to be a problem, so. And we also have had an issue this week with some boats that came round that wanted to moor in the harbour and were refused. And so they've had to actually moor off of the rocks there and use a dinghy to come in. So there's been some issues there as well, just FYI. So lots of negotiations, lots of talking about the harbour, but do we have any way of being more proactive? I don't know.
Nothing you can do at present.
Nothing, so it's okay. And then the final thing on that list, I don't think we've missed anything, is... I'm sorry? The bandstand. Oh, I beg your pardon. Thank you, Councillor Bond. The bandstand. Oh dear. So many of us.
Oh dear, it sounds like good news. We've got eight people potentially interested in doing it, and the only obstacle is a planning application. And none of them are going to. No sensible person is going to take over a white elephant like that for £1 without having planning permission to do whatever it is they want to do. So the question is how we can encourage, indicate our willingness to do what we can to support some of these users. And I wonder whether we know do we know, or can we find out who any of these 8 interested parties are?
They don't wish to be named.
Right. So we don't know who they are then.
Well, I know 4 of them. I think Stephen knows.
I think we ought to facilitate the whole process, because if they don't know how to wade through the planning process and how to monitor whether it's supported locally by us, I think that's very important for us to actually say, no, we're keen on you making a success of this, include us in the conversation. Because,
I'm confused about what planning application they're putting in.
Well, they're probably going to need a sketch as to what they're going to do. They're probably going to make a cafe up there, probably going to have access, as well, all sorts of things they would have to put in order to make it commercially viable.
Changing use at present.
Yeah, you do an outline of the application.
Yeah, so they're just doing outline.
So
okay.
I mean, all those things, we could pass a comment on in our planning. So yes, we would support that if that was developed as a planning application.
The problem is finding the right person to get to.
Yeah.
Because people keep coming, getting lost in the maze. And my inclination is to go for Bob Seeley.
Okay, yeah. I think Councillor Cockett had a lot to do with this in the beginning, didn't you? And Bob Seeley was involved, wasn't he, Councillor Cockett? Yeah. So, and he was very keen to see it move on.
Yes, I mean, we all are, but I mean, I can see it's a very marginal thing. It's a really unusual building to form a change of use on.
It's just that he knows the right people, because he deals in Southern Water a lot about sewage.
Yes. Well, Southern Water, if they're prepared to give it away, probably won't want so much influence on what it looks like, will they? Providing it doesn't affect their pumping station.
It's a matter of finding the right person to talk
Yeah,
to.
well, I'm very keen on us facilitating this process rather than watching it fall down, as we may well do.
Because I think the last time an email was sent to Southern Water, it was sent to about 8 people or something to try and get to the right person. Yeah. I'm not even sure that did get to the right person.
Southern Water isn't the problem, though, is it? I mean, Southern Water said they're willing to dispose of it in principle for next to nothing, and their only issue is they want someone who's got planning permission beforehand.
Yes, but they don't move to the next stage.
Yeah, but it's not their job. It's the job. The planning permission is the job of the prospective purchaser.
Yeah, exactly.
And
so
the local authority.
Why are they doing that then?
They are applying for changing use.
They are holding
What's
it
Southern
up.
Water?
Yes.
What else?
To what? To what?
I don't know.
Well,
That's it.
Change of use.
The 8 purchasers won't all
no,
want it for the same
you've
thing.
got to be specific. I mean,
Well, I believe they're just
aquarium?
doing it to hold things up. I'm sorry to be so cynical, but town clerk agrees with me. I think they're doing it just
Why do they want to hold
just to
things up?
stall things.
They want to get shot of it, surely.
They can't be bothered.
It's very sticky. Okay, so it's a little bit of discussion on that one. And the last one on the list, and hopefully I'm right this time, is poverty. And you have here some facts here, how Nigel and the town clerk have been working with this. And at the moment we're doing the best we can, but it's all about funding. So I don't know if anyone has anything they want to share with us about anything that they think we can do going into this winter that doesn't look very promising. It's a tricky one.
I think it's important that everybody knows the sources of help that they can get, rather than sort of being in ignorance and suffer unnecessarily. I mean, I don't know whether we don't want to set ourselves up as the advice centre, but it's important that people know.
Alison is mailed the Isle of Wight Council's latest distribution of funding, and Alison's mailed dealings of that to all the people on her list who've been receiving free vouchers.
Right, good.
And we have a complaint to the Isle of Wight Council about the way they've chosen to distribute the money. We've got a total of 1.3 million from the Housing Support Fund, and that's distributing, as you probably know, through council tax records, free school meals records, but the support for community organisations to support that kind of initiative, there's no funding for that, and they're charging £71,000 for administration, which doesn't please me very much.
Okay, well, thank you, councillors. There is, believe it or not, at the end of that, a recommendation. And that is that we consider the projects as listed in Appendix B, which are all the ones we've discussed, with a view to adopting it as the Town Council's major projects target. So can I have a proposal for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Lucas, seconded by Councillor Cooper.
It probably doesn't affect the resolution, but there's an awful lot of items there for all of us to consider all the time. I think we need to split up into groups and choose the ones that we think we have most expertise on, and form perhaps 3 groups, because otherwise, you know, we're all going to be semi-involved in everything. You know?
Yes, that's an excellent idea.
So maybe people could declare which are the ones that they would be most interested in. So in a small group.
So could we go away and think about that and do it within a week, shall we say?
Myself and Steve will be.
Yes, I know. Yes, yes. I think some people have got easier choices than others. All right, thank you very much. So now we go on to the town clerk's report, item number 8, please.
I'm happy to take that as read. I won't tell them for the last confidential answer.
Right. Okay. So everyone's probably had a look at that, have they? Yes. So there's been quite a lot going on. So we will take that as read. So that brings us to the end of this busy meeting. Thank you for your input, some really good ideas, and also we have highlighted some pretty tough hurdles to jump over, I think. So I think we will be busy, and we look forward